Yo, what's up, fam? Oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be back with you all tonight. So glad to start another series with you. Thank you for rocking with me all through February. I'm telling you, all right, get your pen and paper ready. We about to have a good time with this series. I prayed about it. And I know Valentine's Day was last month, but some said double back on the relationship. So we going to rock with it this month. Listen, y'all know my table rules. Y'all know my table rules. Go ahead and share the manna. Bring five with you. Bring five. Share the manna with five people that you know need a word. Listen, somebody needs to hear this tonight. Don't be the reason they don't. Share the manna tonight. Also, if you want to join the table, listen, how can you join the table? Join the Facebook group. Join the Facebook group. The Facebook group is where we check on each other, pray with each other. You can share your thoughts on kind of what you thought about the series, invite people. We are definitely growing through the last series. I cannot believe how much we're growing in the Facebook group. I'm so excited about the community that's being developed around Monday Manna. Share it, the group, join the group. And if you want something extra, if you want something to hold on to, some dessert, something you can take with you. Manna to go is here. Listen, you should be getting emails from me. I want to be in your DMs. I'm sorry. I want to be in your DMs with some inspiration. Manna to go. Subscribe to the email so that I can share you with some exclusives. There'll be some exclusive drops coming soon. Genesis of Everything is gonna go away temporarily, but there's some exclusive things we're gonna do with each series that I don't want you to miss, so that you can take home, that you can share with other people, that you can grab and study for forever when we do drop it. So subscribe to the email, subscribe to the Facebook group, join the table, share the manna. Woo! Listen. If something said tonight that touches your heart, I want you to hit that part. We don't say amen at Monday Manna. We say that part. Comment in that part. If it really touches you, put it in the comments. Restate it in the comments. If you think somebody else needs to remember what's being said, put it in the comments. I don't mind you being my scribe tonight. In fact, if you're here with me tonight, if you're rocking with your boy, put the thumbs up in the comment. Put the thumbs up in the comment. Tell me where you watch it from. Say hello. Speak to somebody. Tag somebody. Let somebody know in the comments that you are here for another series. I know y'all saw the graphic. I know you saw it. Yeah, it's going down. It's going down. But before we dive in, let's do a quick recap, because I want to make sure you got Genesis of Everything. Genesis of Everything, real quick. Last series, we talked about how to start the right way. We talked about how to start any project the right way. That if you're going to start, got to have some insight, got to separate from confusion, got to have a supportive atmosphere. We talked about how if you're going to start to understand your identity, you gotta think about your potential. You can't let limiting people stop you. Gotta have prudence, gotta be obedient to what God is telling you, and you gotta maximize your potential. You can't let limiting people limit how you see yourself. And finally, we said Genesis of relationships. See, y'all didn't know I was previewing the next series, but Genesis of relationships. We talked about old Adam in Genesis 2. Talked about how it requires discernment. Yeah, we finna talk about that. We talked about how you gotta have some self-development. We're gonna talk about that. And purposeful partnership. So, I know. Valentine's Day was here. Love month came and gone, but we ain't done talking about relationship. God said double back. What's on the menu tonight is your relationship budget. That's right, your relationship budget. And I dare you, somebody put that in the comments tonight. Your relationship budget. What is your relationship budget? Whew, if someone asks you, what's your relationship budget? Well, what are you budgeting to give to other people? What are you budgeting to allow for people into your space? How are you planning for that? Are you planning, or are you falling in love? I'm so tired of that. You don't fall in love. If you falling in love, we praying for you. I hope you didn't fall in. I hope you didn't fall in. After this series, gonna make sure you don't fall no more. Hello, that part. All right. So let's set the table. Let's set the table. Let's get right into it. Let's set the table tonight. Let's set the table. Y'all know how we do. Before we dive in, let's set the table. Here's my question. And for those of you who are new, when we say set the table, this is me kind of letting you know I want you to take time before I give you these principles to really think about these questions that I'm asking you and allow the Holy Spirit to minister to your heart. Even if you have to watch the replay to watch Set the Table again, don't miss these questions. Here we go. First question. If someone were to determine your future based on your current relationships, what would they conclude about you? Yeah. If someone were to look at the current status of your relationships and who you allow around you and who you allow close to you, and they would look at that to determine where you're going, what would they conclude about you? What would they say about you? What does your relationship say about you? If someone were to draw a picture of you based on your relationships, what would you look like? What does your relationships right now say about you? Let's bring it home. If you had an account balance, say you had an account balance at the bank that was based on your current relationships, how much currency, how much money would you have in the bank? If you had a bank account right now that was based on your relationships, how you're handling your relationships, what would it look like? What would that account look like? I know. Yeah, it's gonna be that type of series. I know. Sit with those. Let's wrestle with those as we go to the recipe. Tonight, I want to give you a recipe for how to determine the balance of your relationship account. A recipe for how to determine the balance of your relationship account. Joe Biden, when he was a presidential candidate, is quoted as saying, "Don't tell me what you value. Let me see your budget and I'll tell you what you value." Don't tell me what you value. Let me see your budget and I'll tell you what you value. We're talking tonight about a recipe for how to determine the status of your relationships. And I'm not just talking about intimate. I'm talking about all types of relationships. The first ingredient, if you're going to walk through how to determine the balance of your relationships, is you got to acknowledge deficits. Yeah, that's a big word, but acknowledge deficit relationships. A deficit is when you have more expenses than revenue. You got more withdrawals than deposits. That leaves you drained and in debt. You got to acknowledge those types of relationships in your life. The Bible reminds us in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, it says not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. The Bible also warns us in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24, that one who has unreliable friends will soon come to ruin. And in Proverbs 13 says a companion of fools suffers harm. Jesus asked this question when he talked about it. He said, can the blind lead the blind? Lest they both fall in the pit? Huh? Do you have expensive friends? Do you have, what is expensive friends? People that take more than they give. People that cost too much to be around. Yeah. I need you to be honest in this season of your life about whether your relationships are you expensive? Are you taking more than you give? We need to acknowledge the deficits in our relationships and the deficits in our habits in dealing with other people. What are you trying to say to me tonight? You got to be careful what you yoke yourself to. That word yoke is an agricultural term where they yoke two oxen together and they would plow the land together. They would literally be yoked together. Young oxen would be yoked to an older oxen. And that young oxen, the idea is that being yoked to the older oxen, it would learn the ways of the older oxen and ultimately learn how to plow the field. Meaning the direction that the other older, stronger oxen went determined the direction that the younger younger, more open to learning, and the one that need to be broken oxen went. Meaning, wherever this oxen went, the younger went. Whatever you're yoked to has the power to determine where you're going and what you do. And some of us, our habits and how we see ourselves and how we do things is often indicative of what we yoked ourselves to. You know how I know that? Your social media timeline. If you look at and you can do this now, if you look at where you're spending your time and look at the consumption of your timeline, I can tell you where your anxiety, in most cases, is probably coming from. I can tell you about your habits because you are allowing what you're yoked to determine where you're going. You got to acknowledge the deficits in your life. What are those things that you're yoked to that are costing you more than they're giving? What are those things that are leaving you drained? Next thing you got to do, if you're going to determine the balance of your relationship account, you got to manage surplus. You got to manage surplus. Second ingredient is you got to manage surplus. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus talks about how when everybody's talking nice about you, that ain't right. If you ain't got no haters, if you ain't got nobody talking about you, he says, whoa, they did the false prophets like that. You got to be careful. He says basically what he tells us is that your life, when you're walking with God and you're doing what God has called you to do and walking with Jesus, will inevitably lead to adversarial type relationships. In other words, somebody somewhere is not going to like you. Somebody somewhere is not going to like you. A healthy relationship budget will always in some way involve opposing force or adversarial type relationships. In other words, everybody's not going to like you. And in fact, in Judges chapter 7, when God was dealing with Gideon and he was getting him ready for victory, he said, you got too many people around you. You're going to have to let some folks go in order to really focus and win the battle. Do you have too many friends? Do you have too many friends? Do you fear rejection? Is there something? Be honest with me. It's just me and you. It's just me and you right now. Do you have a fear of rejection that's causing you to feel like you need everybody in your circle? Too many opinions in your head can cause you to have confusion and cause you maybe to delay the decisions you know you need to make. Surplus. How are you managing surplus? Woo! Are you trying to please everybody? Baby, let me free you. You can't please everybody. You cannot please. Somebody's always going to be unhappy. A healthy relationship account involves an element, here's a word, of isolation. It's unavoidable. If you're doing this right, there's going to be seasons in your life where you're going to have to get by yourself with God so he can show you yourself. And you can't allow the fear of rejection to cause you to miss maturity. Some lessons you're going to have to learn by yourself with God that you couldn't get with other people always in your ear. Move on, D. I know. Ouch. If that hits you, just put ouch. Just put ouch in the comments. I know. I'm just trying to help you. The last ingredient tonight, if you're gonna understand your relationship count, you not only have to manage surplus, not only do you have to acknowledge deficits, but you got to commit to balance. We talked about this already. We talked about in Genesis 2 when Adam was going through, his process before Eve. What made Eve amazing to Adam was that she understood that he could be fruitful with Eve, spiritually and physically. They had the ability. What made Eve different from the wild animals that he named is that they were designed to produce together. In other words, the relationship, one of the attributes of the relationship is her unique ability to take his seed and cultivate it into life. In other words, whatever he gave her, she could multiply it. And that's the type of relationships I need to be in. I need to be around people who cultivate what's inside of me and not take away. Here's the question I have for you on this point. Are you an asset or a liability? Are you an asset or a liability? What's the difference, D? An asset always brings value. A liability is an obligation that you feel like you have to carry. Let me say it again. An asset always brings value, but a liability, in most cases, is an obligation that you're carrying. Now, I know my financial people will say, well, some liabilities are good for you. In this instance, I'm saying liabilities are not always, in relationships, are not always healthy. Some obligations you're not called to carry. But here's the cool part about assets. Assets offset liabilities. In other words, the more assets you have, they give you the wherewithal to handle the obligations you may be carrying in your life. Do you bring value in a relationship, or are people carrying you? Are you taking more than you give? Are people taking more than they give to you? Or do you have people that bring value? Assets always know how to cultivate and speak into your life. Always know how to cultivate life into you. Are you an asset or are you a liability? When you are effective in effective relationships, you should have more assets than liabilities. Don't feel like you got to carry certain people who are not giving you anything in this season of your life, because they're only hindering your development. You got to commit to balance. And committing to balance sometimes involves making difficult decisions about people who've always been in your life. Balance requires, big word, boundaries. And I'm going to tell you now, we teach that cute, but boundaries are sometimes inconvenient. Did you hear what I just said? I said boundaries, when it comes to balance, are sometimes inconveniently necessary. Meaning, initially, it may not feel good, but over time, you will develop and grow much better than you would have had you not set the boundary. I know in certain seasons of my life, I would have learned the lesson quicker had I set the boundary. Had I said, here's another word, no. Let me free you. This is your season to unapologetically say no. If you're gonna commit to balance, you gotta say no sometimes. So if you're gonna, this is part one. I know that was a lot. If you gotta go back and watch the replay, do it. But if you're gonna find and understand the balance of your account, if you're gonna discover what your relationship account is, you gotta acknowledge the deficits. You gotta acknowledge the expensive relationships in your life. You gotta manage the surplus. You gotta manage whether you got too many people in your ear. And you gotta commit to balance. You gotta set some boundaries. You gotta acknowledge the relationships that are leading to cultivation and the relationships that are distracting. Part one of the relationship series. What's in your to-go box, D? What's in my to-go box tonight? In my to-go box is what I just said. I'm in a season of necessary boundaries. So tonight, from the conversation, what I'm taking away is having the boldness to set boundaries. It's going to take a special courage to have those conversations. And I know I'm talking to somebody tonight where your heart says, I can't do it. But God says, you got to do it. You love them. You feel like, you've tried to normalize the toxicity. But in this season, you got to set some boundaries. And that's where I'm at. That's what's in my to-go box tonight. What's in your to-go box? Comment what's in your to-go box. Post in the Facebook group what's in your to-go box tonight. Help somebody. What's in your to-go box from this conversation? Somebody could be blessed from what you share in your testimony. Don't be afraid to be honest. What's in your to-go box tonight? I hope something that was said blessed you tonight. Part one of Relationship Budget. If you got to watch the replay, please do. Connect with us at the table. Join the group. Join the Facebook group. Join Manna to Go emails. and I will see you all next Monday. Y'all be blessed.